Philly, Jahzzar. Today is an incredibly special day here on the old show. And it's not just because we're looking at an all-new Porsche, which is always an exciting thing. It's where we're doing it. My homeland, Greece. Or as the Germans say, Griechenland. So we are going to take a dive on the tech side of all things Cayenne. Now this one's the basic one, but we're going to talk about all three on offer. Currently, you know there's going to be more, but we'll put a pin in that and come back to it later. So with that, let's geek out on all things Porsche Cayenne in Griechenland. Let's kick things off at the top by looking underneath the hood. There are three engines on offer, and all should sound familiar to you if you have seen our Panamera episodes. There is the basic 3-liter single-turbo V6, 340 horsepower, and 332 pounds of torque, which comes in at a very low 1,340 RPM. Then there's the 2.9 twin-turbo V6. It's 440 horsepower, comes in at 5,700 RPM, stays flat all the way to 6,600 RPM. 406 pounds of torque, comes in at a very low 1,800 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 5,300 RPM. Then there's the one you and I are most excited about, the 4-liter twin-turbo V8. 550 horsepower, comes in at 5,750 RPM, stays flat all the way to 6,000 RPM. 567 pounds of torque, comes in at a very low 1,960 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,500 RPM. No matter what flavor of engine, you can have any transmission you want as long as it's an 8-speed Tiptronic. Notice I say Tiptronic and not PDK like we drove in the new Panamera. That has a totally new PDK, dual clutch system, that has much higher levels of torque. That transmission doesn't make the trip to the new Cayenne, so that means the new Cayenne still makes do with a traditional torque converter. Now there's just one more thing while we're still underneath the hood here. All of these engines have a shorter exhaust path, and what that means is from the point of combustion to the turbocharger is physically a shorter path. Now, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, this is supposed to translate into a more responsive engine and faster power delivery. Now, that's something you and I are going to have to test out in the coming full first drive review. Moving to driving dynamics, the theme of borrowing heavily from the Panamera continues, starting with suspension. At the most basic level, there's a steel spring setup. In the front, it's a staggered link. In the rear, it's a multi-link. Then, like those two Panameras we drove in Western Canada, there's a 3-chamber air ride system on offer. This has 5 different driver programmable settings. It has a stabilizer bar that's electrically controlled, no longer hydraulically controlled like in previous Cayennes. And then to take advantage of these changes, for the first time ever on a Cayenne, the wheel sizing is now staggered. And continuing along that same theme, there's also a rear wheel steer system in the Cayenne that can turn the rear wheels up to 3 degrees in the opposite direction. So an aside here while on the topic of 4-wheel steering, those systems are generally designed to give you the sensation of a shorter wheelbase in low-speed situations like parking lots. This still has the same wheelbase at 114 inches. It's the overall length that's increased by 2.4 inches to a total of 194. Which begs the question of the weight, because when the size goes up, usually the weight goes with it. In this case, it's the opposite because the construction has changed. You and I will cover that also in a full first drive review. But the weight ranges from 4,377 pounds all the way up to 4,795 pounds for a full fat twin turbo V8. Okay, so I think that's everything in terms of driving dynamics. No, wait, there's the brakes. But there's so much we have to geek out about the brakes. Let's do what we have more time in another episode. So inside, there's a little bit old, a lot new, and a hell of a lot of themes from other Porsches. Let's start with the old, the general design, the shape of the dashboard, the general design of the door panels, that kind of stuff. That all is similar if you have seen Cayennes before. The new is, it's all kind of streamlined. Like, for example, the vents have moved from here to here. And the reason why they did that is function. The screen now, you ready for this? 12.3-inch diagonal, like to the point where you need more apps in your Apple CarPlay to fill up 12.3-inch screen. Like, we can go into the menu here, and I can get into the nav. And that's really the whole map there. Now, what's interesting, you can't, like, change or share the screen? Like, I'd love to see Apple CarPlay on this half and the map here or something like that. That's one suggestion I would give to the folks in Zuffenhausen. The rest of it is all kind of themes, like the 918 steering wheel, like they did in the 911. They moved all the PASM stuff from here to here. I kind of like it here, but I want more buttons. And that's where we get into where I've got to give some suggestion. In the Panamera, I love the dash, and it's the same thing here. It comes straight out of Panamera. And do you remember in the previous Cayenne and the previous Panamera, they had all those buttons there, man? And even up here. Now, I know I'm an av geek, and I love toggle switches and buttons. This has all switched to haptic feedback, and I would argue it's probably the best type of haptic feedback out there. However, I think, and this is me from a theoretical point of view, when you're piloting, this is a 4,500-pound car, you want more toggle switches like this. You want more real buttons because you want to be focused here, not here, and that's the main problem with haptic feedback. Plus, there's the OCD in me where you get all the fingerprints on it, and that would just drive me nuts. Another suggestion I would go with here is the volume switch. It's right behind this knob here, and check this out. This knob is to adjust the map, not the volume. I can't tell you how many times I have been driving around today and tried to lower the volume by doing this, and I feel like maybe I'm doing something wrong when the volume is here. I would argue you'd want to make this the knob here and perhaps make this something within the haptic feedback because you don't really use that as often, especially when what they've done is to get the classic Porsche tachometer, rev counter, whatever you want to call it, in the center, which is where it should be, but they've kept it as old school gauges. Thank you very much. But on the side, they still look like old school gauges, and I would argue graphically they represented the best that I've seen. However, these are TFT screens. It's just setup. It's the best like of old and new, where you can take that map, put it here if you need more detail. Hence, going back to having a knob for the radio rather than for the map. I think it's backwards. Other than that, a stunning place to be. The turbo, it's fitted with a suede headliner as standard. So interrupt our regularly scheduled program to prove a point. This is a base Cayenne. Doesn't even have half the options that fancy turbo we're looking at, but it does have the tan interior, including the contrasting stitching and two-tone bits. Do you now see why you need a contrast interior? And that's where we get into some of this stuff over here. I see what they're doing with the detailing, but as much as you and I joke around about all of like the options that you can put in these things, and trust me, this one's got, I think, $60,000 just in options. The benefit of that is you can build the car any way you want. Like a buddy of mine, he bought a basic 911, like the lowest horsepower one, but he got carbon ceramic rotors and no sunroof. He built a custom car. You can do the same thing here, and that's kind of what I love about what Porsche does with the options. Maybe make them a little bit cheaper. Other than that, wonderful place to be. Now there's one more thing, and we need to file it under my favorite heading, a party trick. Do you remember when we drove the Sport Turismo in Canada, what, like 2-3 months ago? Santa Maria Madre de Dios, do I love that car. Anyway, that was the first non-911, really the first Porsche, like, prudent vehicle that had active aero that was fitted to it. Basically, an adjustable spoiler in the back. Well, guess what's made its way to the Cayenne? Now, I found out a bit more about this because I cornered one of the engineers while I was here. Turns out there's 5 different settings here. There's a basic one, which is basically, this is just down flush with the car. That's called Eco Mode. Then it can go up 20 mils. Then it could go up 40 mils, that's just regular Sport mode. And then Sport Plus has its own mode, goes to 60 mils. And then get this one's fitted with a panoramic sunroof. They have a mode that accounts for an open sunroof, and that goes up to 80 mils. That is the party trick. Anyway, we have covered a ridiculous amount today, so let's take a break, but let's reconvene here in my homeland 2 more times, not once, 2 more times. We're gonna drive this in a full first drive review, the turbo, and we're gonna drive the Cayenne S, the 2.9 twin turbo V6. And I'm gonna tell you there's a bit of a surprise here, but I won't tell you which one. So make sure you come back for that. In the intro, I'm gonna leave you with a question, and I kinda wanna set the stage here. Not knowing how they drive, which one would you choose? The basic 3-liter we really didn't spend a lot of time talking about, the 2.9S, or the 4-liter twin turbo. And just don't tell me which one, but tell me why. And Do you have a Cayenne? If so, which one? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media. MotoManTV on word, MotoManTV on word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to say it's been an incredible experience for the first time ever coming and shooting in my homeland. We need to do this more often. Until I see you next time, bis später. Or really, should I say, as the sun goes down, Galadikta.